Ladies and gentlemen, in just a moment you are going to hear the voice of a man who will tell you some tremendously important facts, some amazing facts. The voice of a man who has made a discovery that is revolutionizing human thought, changing human lives, bringing happiness and success where discontent and failure were before. A discovery which in the short space of 1 year swept across the continent, encircled the earth, invaded almost every country on the globe. The following 15 minutes is far too short for him to explain his discovery in detail, but he is going to give you flashes of it, flashes of truth that may startle you. You probably already know about this man, have heard his name mentioned many times. He is Dr. Frank Robinson, one of the most outstanding figures in the world of modern science. But first, we introduce you to your guide who will take you to Dr. Robinson's home.
Way out in northern Idaho, where the pines are nodding and swaying to the whispering breezes of the wide open spaces, nestles a happy home. In that home is a beautiful pipe organ. And seated at the console of that organ is a man who is internationally known and who has given to the world the answer to a question that has puzzled mankind since the beginning of the human race. Before we meet him, let's listen a moment while he plays. Beautifully played, Dr. Robinson, and it almost seems a shame to bring this microphone into your study here and break into your hour of relaxation. But there are lots of people out there waiting to hear about your discovery. So I'm going to begin very abruptly by asking you a question.
And if I can, I'll be very glad to answer it.
All right. Get ready for a cross-examination. In a few words, what is this discovery of yours? Why is it attracting thinking people all over the world? Just what can it do for a person?
Well, in a few words, it enables a person to turn failure into success.
That's a tremendous claim, Dr. Robinson.
Yes, because behind it lies a tremendous truth.
I'm going to be just a bit skeptical now. How does it enable a person to turn failure into success?
Let me answer that by asking you a question. Do you know anything about a radio set?
Well, I know how to twist a dial.
But you've seen the various devices that go into a radio set, haven't you?
Yes.
Now, if I give you all the things you need, tubes and amplifiers and so on, could you put them together so that sitting there in my study in Moscow, you could hear an orchestra playing in New York?
No, I'm afraid not.
Why?
Well, because I don't know the principle upon which a radio set operates.
That's the answer to your question. You nor no one else can successfully build a radio set unless you know the principles, the law by which radio operates. And you nor no one else can build a successful life unless you know the principles, the law by which life operates. If you had never heard of radio, and I gave you the various necessary equipment and told you that by using it properly you could hear an orchestra playing in New York, you'd say, "Oh, that's impossible. It can't be done." And yet it can be done if you know the underlying principle. Ever since men and women appeared on this earth, they've had the equipment to make a spiritual radio set. A radio set by which they can tune in and use for their own benefit a tremendous power. Only, until just recently, no one has known how to assemble this equipment and make it work. Until just recently, no one has known the law by which it operates.
Doctor, you mentioned a tremendous power. A power that a person can tune in on and use for his own good. Now, what is this power? How do I know that it really exists? Prove it to me.
I don't have to prove it to you. You can prove it to yourself. Go out some evening and look at the stars. So many you can't count them. And these are only a few. There are so many, many more that are not visible to the naked eye. Yet all of these stars move in their courses with such exactness that scientists can calculate their movement far in advance. Doesn't that indicate that there is an intelligent power governing this universe? Now let's go to the other extreme. Let's take the atom, so infinitely small that you nor I have never seen one. Hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms combine to form a microscopic molecule of water in the proportion of 2 to 1. 2 hydrogen atoms to 1 oxygen atom. Always combining in the proportion of 2 to 1. Never 3 to 1, nor 4 to 1, but 2 to 1. Whether you look at the ocean or a raindrop, what you see is molecules of water formed by hydrogen combining with oxygen in the proportion of 2 to 1. Again, the working of a law that operates with mathematical certainty. Now, doesn't plain common sense tell you that a law which governs everything in this universe, from gigantic planets millions and millions of miles away down to microscopic things like atoms, or even smaller yet, electrons, can also govern human life, and with the same degree of certainty?
Yes, I begin to see your point.
Suppose a molecule of water were like a human being. Suppose it moved of its own volition, its own willpower. And suppose, instead of forming itself of 2 parts hydrogen and 1 part oxygen, in accordance with governing principle, it ignored the principle and used another proportion. That molecule would probably say, somehow or other, I'm not right. I'm not as healthy, normal molecules should be. I'm a failure. I guess I'm just unlucky. It's simply that the molecule is not acting in accordance with the underlying law. And it's the same way with men and women. Let me say something which I'd like to have you remember if you forget everything else. The difference between success and failure lies in the understanding of the law governing success and failure. You can argue any way you want to, but you can't get away from that fact.
But, Doctor, you say this law has always existed. I thought your discovery was something new.
The law isn't new. The power has always existed. I have been fortunate enough to discover how men and women can apply it to their own lives, can tune into this power.
And people are making this discovery, this philosophy of yours, actually work?
I think that question answers itself. If my philosophy were not helping people, it certainly would not have the widespread acceptance it has today. Doesn't it stand to reason that a philosophy which has thousands and thousands of followers in all parts of the world must work, must produce results? Not vague, abstract, intangible results which will happen sometime in the future, but practical benefits that happen right now. Benefits that any person, if he is willing, can enjoy.
It sounds like a miracle, Doctor.
No, it isn't a miracle. I'm not a miracle man. I haven't any magic potion or formula. I have perfected my studies and proven them just as inventors study out and perfect radio. One is no more marvelous nor impossible than the other. They both have come about through scientific research. Let me make a little confession. 40 years ago, there never lived a bigger failure than I was. For 40 years, I had struggled with the winds of adversity and was defeated at every turn. I blundered along, lacking all the things I wanted and getting nowhere. I was like a man in an automobile who doesn't know how to control nor steer that automobile. The mechanism was there, the power was there, but I did not know how to use it. And just like such a man in an automobile, finally the crash came. Then I began to do some thinking that I should have done years before. It occurred to me that surely the great overwhelming power or law which created and governs the whole universe is powerful enough to give me the little things I needed for success, happiness, and financial independence, if I only knew how to tap that power, to tune into it. I studied out a plan, put it to work, and it did work. It worked for me, and since then it has worked for thousands of others whose names and unsolicited testimonials crowd my files. It's not a theory or an experiment. It's a proven fact. All I ask is that a person who is earnest in his desire for the better things of life put himself under my guidance for a few months. Then just see what happens.
And just how do you tap this power, Dr. Robinson?
I'm afraid it's going to take too long to answer that question in the time we have left. But I promise you this. I'll tell you more about it the next time you call on me.
All right, Dr. Robinson. And now before I leave, would you be kind enough to play for me once more?
Certainly.
Play that selection you were playing when I came in. Let the rest of the world go by. You know, somehow there's something restful about it. Something that brings a sense of peace. Gives a picture of these great open spaces where you live.
You have heard the voice of Dr. Frank Robinson. Dr. Robinson has a vital message. Be sure to tune into his next broadcast, which will be announced in just a moment. But better than that, write to him for the free outline of his discovery and philosophy. It will tell you much more about his astonishing plan than can be crowded into this series of little radio talks. It contains information which may change your whole life, information that may be the turning point from failure to success, and it costs you nothing. A penny postcard will bring it to you. Just address Dr. Frank Robinson, Radio Department, Moscow, Idaho. I'll repeat that. Address Dr. Frank Robinson, Radio Department, Moscow, Idaho. Be sure to put Radio Department in the address, so your request will not get mixed up with the thousands of letters from Dr. Robinson's students. Just Dr. Frank Robinson, Radio Department, Moscow, Idaho. We return you now to your local announcers. There has probably never been a program on the air for a long, long time that has caused so much comment, so much discussion as Dr. Robinson's last broadcast. From that one short talk, he has received countless letters from thinking people everywhere. Yet this is really not to be wondered at when you consider that in the short space of 1 year, Dr. Robinson's amazing discovery flashed clear around the globe, that today he has students in every part of the world. That in itself is evidence that he has discovered something big, something vital, something extremely important to every one of us. Before his last broadcast, I promised you that he would reveal some amazing facts, some illuminating truths, and I make that same promise again. It will be very much worth your while to listen to every word he has to say. And so once again, we will hear the voice of Dr. Frank Robinson, the man whose work is one of today's international topics. And here is your guide, ready to take you to Dr. Robinson's study.
Through the magic of radio, let's take a trip way out yonder to a happy home which nestles snugly among the pine-covered hills of northern Idaho. The home of Dr. Frank Robinson. At this time of day, we will probably find him seated at the console of his magnificent pipe organ. And as we walk up the path toward the house, we pause to listen. How do you do, Doctor?
Well, I'm certainly glad to see you back again. Won't you come in? Just make yourself comfortable.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. We were just listening to you play the organ. I only wish I had the ability on the pipe organ you have.
It is not so much ability as a recognition of the constant presence of the power controlling the vital things of life.
Doctor, is that the power you spoke of during our last little talk? The power that a person can, as you said, tune in on, tap, use to make his own life happier, fuller, more successful? Is that what you mean?
That's what I mean exactly. The power that created the universe.
But that's God, isn't it, Dr. Robinson?
It all depends on how you think of God, how you define the word.
Well, the major systems of religion in this country teach that God is the infinite creator of the universe, and that he came down to earth in the form of a man. Now, isn't that correct?
Yes, that is what they teach.
Then we are told, I believe, that the message of salvation brought into the world by this man was not accepted. Is that correct?
That is correct.
We are also told that instead of his message being accepted, the one who brought it was crucified and buried, after which he arose from the grave, ascended into heaven, where he now is. Is that a fact?
That is exactly the teaching of most of our major religious systems today. Only it is not true.
You mean to tell me, Doctor, that this story is not true?
Well, what I am going to say now will probably cause consternation among some religious organizations, although they themselves know me very well, and they have been unable to date to successfully refute one thing I have ever written in any of my books or magazine articles. To be honest with myself, and with the 120 million Americans in this country, I am bound to say to you that instead of the story being original, it is only an absolute copy of similar stories held by other religious organizations of far greater age than this so-called Christian philosophy being advocated today. Furthermore, would it surprise you if I told you that my last book has in it a list of 16 crucified world saviors prior to the time of Christ? Would that surprise you?
It certainly would. For I had no idea that the crucifixion story, the resurrection story, and the Immaculate Conception story had ever been told before the time of Christ.
That is exactly what millions of people think, who do not know the facts and have not taken the trouble to find out the facts.
Well, Doctor, I give you credit for knowing what you're talking about, for no man in 5 years' time could have met with the amazing response you have had unless his philosophy of life were true and did actually answer the religious question for hundreds of thousands of people.
I make no claim to possessing any superior knowledge or ability along religious lines. The only claim I make is that after many years of honest investigation of the story told to be by my father, who is a Baptist preacher, I have found that story to be absolutely untrue.
Well then, Doctor, in your opinion, where does the truth lie?
I am glad you asked that question. Now let me answer it by asking you a question. Where do you think is the place to go to find the secrets of life? In other words, has it ever occurred to you that instead of the great God of this universe manifesting himself to only one man 2,000 years ago and then hiding himself, that this great creative intellect might be still manifesting himself to us? And has it further occurred to you that the doctrines of God might be very effectively hidden from the human race because they are so totally different from the supposed doctrines you and I have been taught from childhood? Did that ever appeal to you?
Well, I'd never thought about it in exactly that way.
You and I do not have to wait until we die and gather beyond the tomb before we can know the existence of the great God law behind this universe. We can find out that supreme intelligence here and now.
Well, Dr. Robinson, that is a stupendous statement. Now will you explain to me, please, just how we may find the actual power of this God law, as you call it? And will you also tell me, please, in what way that great God law manifests itself in the human life after you have found it?
Well, I certainly will. And you are going to be a different man after this interview. Instead of God coming down to this earth in the form of a man and all the rest of that, let me say to you right off that God is no personality of any kind and never was. The supreme intelligence which caused this created universe to be is fundamentally a spiritual law. And you ask me, I believe, what the manifestations of this law were. Well, now, what do you think they should be? What are the things you need to make your life what you feel it should be? Isn't there a feeling within you that you are only partially living up to the opportunities you have? Do you feel supremely happy in your accomplishments today? You certainly do not. All right now, the spiritual God law, when found and intelligently followed, can provide every normal human being with whatever things may be necessary to his or her health, happiness, and abundant success.
Doctor, will you say that again, please? I'm afraid I didn't quite get it.
There exists today, and there has always existed, a spiritual power so dynamic that all other powers or forces fade into insignificance beside it. This spiritual law is God, and it exists in order that every created human being may enjoy life's pleasures and benefits to the very full. As far as I am concerned, I am not in the slightest degree interested in stories told to me about what may happen to me in heaven if I am good down here. That, when you know the origin of the teaching, is the same philosophy of life and God held by every heathen and pagan religion the world has ever seen, and I don't want any of it.
Well, Dr. Robinson, I certainly can see now why your philosophy has caused so much discussion. Now, you say the things taught us by present-day religions aren't true. What's the test of that?
The test is whether or not these teachings will actually work. If the story advocated and taught by present-day religions is true, it will work in my life and yours. And you know, and I know, that it does not work. You can try from now until the crack of doom to find God by those methods, and you will never find him.
Well, let me put my question in a different form. What is the test of your philosophy, your teachings?
The very same test. Does it work? I'd like to read you a letter that I happen to have here. It came in today. I quote, "Dear Dr. Robinson, reporting as I promised after studying your lesson number 16, I actually have come into robust health, domestic, and all-around happiness. I am succeeding nicely in 2 lines of money-making business, whereas I was ill, divorced, and down and out as a businessman 32 weeks ago when your first lesson reached me. On April the 30th, 1934, I remarried my divorced wife. Why? Well, you know why. Now we are supremely happy. Thanks for revealing a living law to me that does work here and now. Sincerely your student, C.H.W. I close the quote. And this is only one of literally thousands of similar letters that are in my files. Letters that anyone may come in and examine and discuss with me. I haven't any deep, mysterious secret, any hidden magical formula, nor is my philosophy difficult to understand. On the contrary, it is very easy to understand. It is simply this. Do you not think that the law which created this universe and keeps it running, the law which controls everything from gigantic planetary systems down to the electron, is powerful enough to give you and me the things we need for health, happiness, and success? Of course it is. All we have to do in order to have these things right here and now is to know how to use that law.
And your philosophy teaches us how to use the law?
That is it exactly.
Well, Dr. Robinson, you've given me a lot of things to think about, a lot of thought to take away with me. But before I go, I'd like to hear you play that selection again. Will you, please?
Why, gladly.
You have heard the voice of Dr. Frank Robinson. Perhaps some of the statements he made startled you. They have startled the whole world. But the fact that they have been so widely accepted, the fact that Dr. Robinson has followers all over the world, must prove that his philosophy works, must prove its truth. However, Dr. Robinson does not ask you or anyone to take anything for granted. All he asks is that you put yourself under his guidance for a few months. Then see what happens. Dr. Robinson will be on the air again very soon. Your local announcer will give you the date and exact time. Be sure to tune in. But better still, write to Dr. Robinson for an outline of his discovery and philosophy. There is no charge for this. You will not be obligated in any way, and a penny postcard will bring it. Just address Dr. Frank Robinson, Radio Department, Moscow, Idaho. Dr. Frank Robinson, Radio Department, Moscow, Idaho. Be sure to address your request to the Radio Department so that it will not get mixed up with the thousands of letters from Dr. Robinson's students. We return you now to your local announcer. Ladies and gentlemen, 50 years ago, within the memory of many listening to this program, people laughed at the idea of man flying through the air. 50 years ago, if anyone had advanced the theory that you could sit in your home and hear an orchestra playing half the world away, he would probably have been locked up as a madman. And yet, nowadays, the airplane and the radio are commonplace. That which was thought to be impossible has become a normal, natural, everyday sort of thing. 5 years ago, a man living in Moscow, Idaho, announced an idea, a discovery just as revolutionary as the idea of flying and radio was a half-century ago. He advanced the philosophy that pervading this universe is a powerful force, a force which men can use to turn failure into success, discontent into happiness. At first, this philosophy was met with doubt. Why, such a thing was impossible. Only it wasn't impossible. People saw it actually worked, saw it produce definite, tangible results. Doubt turned into amazement, amazement into acceptance. Today, that philosophy has invaded every civilized country on the globe, has thousands upon thousands of followers. And the man who gave this discovery to the world, who is today one of the most discussed figures in the realm of scientific thought, is, in just a few moments, going to talk to you. What a tremendously interesting story he must have to tell. That man, and you've heard his name mentioned many times before, is Dr. Frank Robinson. And now we present your guide who will take you to Dr. Robinson's home.
Far away from the clamor and clash and tumult of the cities, out where the silent, pine-clad hills of northern Idaho are silhouetted against the calm sweep of sky, there stands a happy home. If you were to peep into this home at a certain hour of the day, you would see a man seated at the console of a magnificent pipe organ. And standing there just outside the door, you would probably pause and listen.
Well, hello. By all means, come in.
I'm sorry we were a little late, but the truth of the matter is we stopped outside to listen to you play. You know, it would be downright barbaric to interrupt a selection as beautiful as that one.
That was a beautiful number, wasn't it?
You know, they say the age of miracles ended 2,000 years ago. But when I think of a man so divinely inspired that he could compose music like that, well, I think we still have miracles.
I'm afraid I can't agree with you on that point. There never was, nor is there today, any such thing as miracles.
Well, Doctor, that's a pretty broad statement, isn't it?
Yes, it is a broad statement. It is a statement I certainly would hesitate to make unless I could back it up with facts.
What are these facts, Dr. Robinson? I'm interested. I'd like to hear them.
All right, I'll tell you about them. To begin with, what is your definition of a miracle?
Well, my idea of a miracle is something that occurs contrary to natural law, an act performed by God.
Yes, that's the general conception of a miracle. Something that occurs contrary to the natural laws governing the universe. Now, who made these laws?
Why, God.
Very well. Now, doesn't it seem unreasonable to you that an omniscient, all-wise deity should make a set of laws governing the universe and then turn right round and break them? Doesn't it seem unreasonable that he should create laws and then he himself disregard those laws for the benefit of one or two individuals? That's hardly being fair, is it? And yet we are taught that God is a just God.
Well, the way you put it, that's a hard question to answer, Dr. Robinson. All I can say is that Bibles, which are the highest authority of orthodox religions, record any number of miracles and describe them in detail.
For instance?
Well, the miracles of virgin birth or resurrections. In fact, all the religious philosophy of Christendom are originally based upon them, so they must be true.
Well, I'm going to have to make a startling statement. A statement that will cause many people to say, why, this man is a blasphemer. He does not believe in God. And the statement is this: these stories of virgin births, crucifixions, resurrections, and atonements are neither original with the Christian religion, nor are they true. They are, all of them, duplicates of stories told by heathen and pagan religions long before the Christian era was ever thought of.
Can you prove that, Doctor?
I certainly can. In my last book, for instance, I give positive, irrefutable evidence, taken from myths which existed long before Christianity, of at least 16 gods who were crucified. According to these pagan myths, most of these gods were born of virgins, and most of them rose from the tomb and ascended into heaven. Now, if what I say in my book is a fact, it means that many millions of Christian people have been taught an utterly false philosophy of life and God. And if that is a fact, then the quicker we find out and tell those good people about it, the quicker they will realize that they had better look somewhere else to find God.
But, Doctor, I've always been taught that by no possible means could I know God until after the great resurrection day, after the books had been opened. Then, if our names were found written in the book, we should find peace and happiness in the hereafter. You mean to tell me that isn't true?
Every religious organization teaching that story has erected a barrier against the human race. It says to us, you must enter the kingdom by this one way. There is no other door. But the facts about the truths of God as they actually exist disclose a very different picture than that. For instead of there being only one gate, or a barrier to the spiritual realm, let me say to you that this realm is wide open to whosoever wants to enter. Furthermore, I say to you that there exists today a spiritual power which is God. And I further say to you that this spiritual power or law may be used by you personally and individually for every right thing your heart can possibly desire. Not in the hereafter, but in the here and now.
That's a pretty revolutionary teaching, Doctor.
Yes, it's a mighty revolutionary teaching. But I am in a position to prove that it is an absolutely true teaching. that such a spiritual power or law does exist, that it can give us what we want for fuller, happier, and more successful lives.
Then why hasn't the human race found this out long ago?
I'll tell you why. Until just recently, humanity has been utterly oblivious to the stupendous operations here and now of the law of God because it has never had the facts brought to its attention. It has been blinded by dogmas, creeds, and traditions. But humanity is coming to see that these teachings do not work.
In other words, you mean people are not as religious as they once were?
Oh, no, I do not mean that. There never was a time in the history of mankind when men and women were more religious and eager for authentic information regarding God than they are today. But people today are intelligent. They're beginning to think. You cannot hand them a stone and say, "This is a piece of bread." You cannot hand them a scorpion and say, "This is a fish." For people today know the difference between religious dogma and religious truth. I am going to give you facts which, if you absorb them, will change your entire religious thinking and will put into your hands a spiritual law so stupendous and so powerful that through the workings of this spiritual law and through its power, you may make of your life here and now whatever you choose to make of it. Of course, if you prefer unhappiness to happiness, if you prefer poverty to material abundance, you may have them. That is your privilege. But I am banking upon the fact that you and the vast majority are more than anxious to listen to facts about who and what God is and how he manifests here and now. For I am saying to you that this great, dynamic, unseen power is manifesting on this earth for your specific and personal benefit and for no one else's.
Well, Doctor, if you can show me truth about this power, which personally I can use to obtain happiness and success, I'm not so narrow that I'd refuse to listen. In fact, I'd like to have you go right on right now and tell me some more about your philosophy.
I'm afraid there isn't time for any more discussion.
Hey, I hadn't realized how the minutes were slipping by. Well, there's at least time for a little more music, isn't there?
Yes, we might be able to squeeze in a little more. Any particular selection you'd like to hear?
Do you know My Paradise?
Ah, that's a real melody. I'll play it for you.
As our guide said, surely there is no one so narrow that he or she would refuse to listen to facts that might mean greater happiness, more abundant success, a fuller, more profitable life. Be sure to tune in to Dr. Robinson's next little discussion. Your announcer will give you the time and date in just a moment. Or, if you prefer to get his complete message, the complete outline of his philosophy, without waiting for his next broadcast, write to him. The outline will be sent to you immediately, without cost to you, without obligating you in the slightest degree. Just write to Dr. Frank Robinson, Radio Department, Moscow, Idaho. I'll repeat that. Dr. Frank Robinson, Radio Department, Moscow, Idaho. Be sure to mention Radio Department so that your request will not get mixed up with the thousands of letters from Dr. Robinson's students. You don't have to write a letter. A postcard will do. Simply say, "Send me your outline." Sign your name and address, and send the card to Dr. Frank Robinson, Radio Department, Moscow, Idaho. We return you now to your local announcer.